What's up, Candy Ken? What's up, Baby J? How's it going?
Not today.
Candy Ken and Baby J.
It's Candy Ken.
Welcome to the Candy Ken Show.
I work as a holistic health practitioner, and that's an intentionally kind of vague descriptor of my work because in my work, I have a lot of tools in the toolbox. Basically, what I do is I work with men. I teach online courses and host residential retreats. I also have a one-on-one consulting practice where I help individuals to leverage natural means to optimize their masculine vitality. Masculine vitality is like, you know what it is. It's the sense of purpose, drive, ambition, vigor for life. And if you look around at the modern man, you see that that's largely absent in the general population. A lot of people are low energy, not well, and so I feel I have a real, part of my spirit, my soul is revolutionary, I like a good fight. And so my fight is to bring vitality back into the spine of the modern man. Because in my personal life, I know what it is to be depleted, depressed, overwhelmed, overweight, not well, no love for the man in the mirror. I know what that is like because I lived it. And I know what it's like to kick the sheets off the bed in the morning and be amped to get to the mission and to actually enjoy your daily life and to have this feeling of getting healthier and stronger with the passing of time. And I know how to get from A to B, and that's the work that I offer in the world.
Amazing. I think that's more needed than anything these days. When I look at any Hollywood movie, anything on the social media, the more you are aware of the propaganda, how they're trying to make the man softer and softer, and how they try to make it seem like a strong man is not necessary, toxic, abusive.
Totally.
I mean, you name it. I watched the Barbie movie. I sat only there. First of all, I am Candy Ken, right? So I love Barbie. I thought Barbie was always hot and cool, and I don't have nothing against it. And the movie looked cool. I like colors. I like the styling. I was all about it. I watched the first half an hour. I was a big fan. I was hyped. This is so cool. They were drinking water and no liquid came out. It was really cool and artistic.
I didn't see it myself.
Yeah. So but then there was this whole propaganda part about how toxic men are.
Yeah.
And it was just a whole beating down on Ken. And it made me really sad. And it just, even if you haven't seen it, it's just any movie you watch, the representation of the man, they're trying to really hype up men that stay at home, men that are overweight,
harmless.
Men, yes, the soft female man. So I think this is where your work is so existentially important, more than ever, I feel like, because my grandpa was a strong man, built his own home with his own hands. Even my dad was a much stronger man when I was a child than now.
Right.
I can see how my dad has been softening up a 180.
Yeah. So a few thoughts. Number one, I didn't see the Barbie movie, but it is increasingly difficult to watch movies as your view widens because you can see the subtle messaging that is in pop culture and
yes,
you're aware of it and it just it feels kind of gross. I don't really watch much movies anymore. The other thing is, I agree with everything that you say. It's kind of understandable. The pendulum of culture has to swing. It's always in motion. And there was a time in human history, American history, and not so distant past where toxicity maybe isn't the right word, but things were out of balance. And the pendulum has to swing too far in the other direction so that we can arrive in the middle, even for a moment. And then it just, and I think we're in a point culturally where we're swinging a little too far out of balance away from strength, vitality, virility, self-reliance, self-responsibility. And it's very easy to say, they want this, they want that, they are wanting this messaging, and that's all true. Honestly, I don't know who they are. I think that it's maybe doesn't serve to explore that, the matrix, the evil overlords that are wanting to castrate the modern man. The revolution that I spoke of earlier, what I'm putting out there is one of personal responsibility. You know, the world can change, culture can change, the universe can be saved one by one. And so it's for each man to take an honest inventory of himself, to look the man in the glass in the eye and say, where am I out of balance? Where am I not showing up? And then make it your personal revolution, your personal battle to bring yourself into balance, to become a man who others look to and say, God damn, that's possible. It's possible to be that tenacious and that gentle. It's possible to be that happy and that generous, you know? And that's what I call the savage and the saint. That's my work. That's my name of my company, but it's not a company, man. It's not a brand. It's a living philosophy. And it is this responsibility to savagely improve yourself in all ways, always, to relentlessly move forward, to identify your purpose and achieve it in spite of all obstacles, like an animal. But that's only half the equation. The other half is the capacity to take a deep breath right now and relax and recognize that you are beautiful, you are perfect just the way you are, that life is beautiful and perfect just the way it is, and that nothing needs to change at all. And when you live in the middle of those two capacities, masculine vitality pops up through your spine, and you become a strong man who people trust. And that's what we need, because I really do believe the more strong, self-reliant, healthy, vital men we have, the safer everybody is. And the more weak, victim mentality, greedy, unconscious men, the more dangerous the world is.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can post shit on social media all day and try to figure out what the matrix is and who controls it. But at the end of the day, Troy says that too. It all starts with you.
That's it.
What can you control, really? You know, you can only control that much, and but you can very well control what kind of man you are and what kind of person you are every day.
Yeah.
I cannot control. I can spend probably a lifetime trying to figure out who the matrix is.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I mean, you gotta. What kind of man are you?
Yeah, you got to let go of the things that are beyond your capacity to control and focus locally.
Yeah.
Super locally.
Yeah.
And the most local phenomena that you have a capacity to improve is your own mind and your own heart. And just let that be the extent of your concerns in the world. And then watch what happens. You know, because it's only when a man like opens his own heart, frees his own love, his own life force energy, and deals with the trauma and the emotional residue that we all collect through life. You turn toward it, you feel it, you sit in that muck, you heal it, you clear your mind, you know, you learn how to become still, present, grounded. Now you are the kind of person who can help other people because you've cleaned your own mess up, you know, and so now you're available to be useful, to be of service. But until you claim that most primary responsibility of this individual that I am, then you're really no good to anybody. And that's something that I confront a lot in my work, like, because I work with husbands, fathers, successful individuals who have a lot on their plate, and they say, well, I don't have time for that. I don't have time. And I say, well, the thing that your son needs most from you is for you to take some time to deal with yourself. So it's not a selfish thing. It's putting yourself first, your own well-being, mental, spiritual, emotional, physical well-being first is a selfless act, because you become more useful when you're well. And if you're not well, you're just adding to the problem.
I always tell my wife, if I'm not good, I can't be good for you.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of times where I have to go to the gym, or I have to go on a run, get in the ice, whatever it is. I have to like cool off and ground myself, breathe, look my priorities, who I want to be, how I present myself.
Sure.
And then once you, like you say, once you control your body, your mind, everything else falls into place.
That's it.
Almost naturally.
Yeah.
And then you become so powerful, you pull everybody up instead of putting everybody down.
That's well said. I don't know a single super high functioning man who seems to be clicking on all cylinders, business, physical, relationship, emotional, that doesn't take time for himself every day. I think a man's spirit is nourished in times of contemplative solitude, and the degree to which a man goes without that is the degree to which he becomes a little skitzed, a little annoyed, a little angry or anxious. The medicine. That's another thing in my work. The real medicine, the real cures are free. Billion-dollar industries, pharmaceutical industries, would prefer that we do not understand that time spent in silence, learning how to breathe, getting good sleep, drinking clean water and enough of it, eating real food, and moving our bodies in ways that feel good will basically solve 99.8% of your problems. No pharmaceutical interventions required, but nobody profits on those things. So if your day doesn't provide the time and space for you to tend to those 6 boxes, then don't be surprised when you're not well.
Absolutely. No, and then sometimes it's hard to describe to somebody that it's not selfish to take time for yourself.
Yeah.
It's much more selfish to. I feel like this whole mental health pandemic is a very narcissistic, egoistic way of being like, hey, look at my problems.
Yeah.
Instead of being me going and addressing my issues, or being in silence, or addressing my needs.
Or addressing the daily lifestyle behaviors that got you into this mess.
Yeah.
Bro, I've worked with people for 3 months or 4 months, and they've said to me, and this has happened frequently, dude, I feel like we've gotten more done in this time. I have more of a sense of clarity and peace around my issues than I did in 2 or 3 years of talk therapy. Sometimes it's useful to talk about your issues, but sometimes it just perpetuates these perspectives and beliefs that I'm an individual with a problem, and you just keep talking about it and reifying it and making it more real. When, sometimes just taking some really deep breaths to get you out of your head gives you the perspective that you needed to choose a new way of being. Like I said, the real cures are free.
No, and if you focusing on your problems, especially as a man, I do not understand how females work and how they see problems, because it seems like sometimes they just like talking about problems. As a man, normally you're very more rational. and you like to address and solve problems rather than address it, like talking about it.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, obviously. So I can only speak for myself, but addressing, or like, it seems sometimes I love when they say, especially when you become a dad or you're just a man, normally you have to show up and do what you gotta do anyways. Your boss doesn't care about how you're feeling. Your wife mostly doesn't care how you're feeling. You know, when there's an intruder, I have to perform. I have to protect. I have to serve. There's no I'm feeling like bad, or I'm not in the mood to protect you. No, you do what you got to do, and the gym comes in handy in these kind of things because it's motivation is garbage. It's about discipline and about showing up every day and getting it done anyways. No matter, I don't even question how I feel a lot of times. So I feel like this whole, oh, I'm depressed, I'm anxious, this whole addressing it so much and overly all the time, it seems like a lot of like focusing only on yourself and your needs than on what other people need.
That's an interesting way of putting it. I have I think a slightly different view. So in my work, a major theme of my work is cultivating emotional intelligence and developing sensitivity. So what I see in the men's work world, let's say, are two extremes there. One is more like what you just said. It doesn't matter how you feel, show up, In fact, you shouldn't even really consider how you feel. Just mute that. Just press the mute button there. And I get that. And there is definitely times in life where, you just have to show up. But if that becomes the operating system permanently, I think sooner or later a man is going to reach a point where he collapses. You can only ignore how you feel for so long. And before, you just crack under the pressure. And that happens. I've seen it happen. In fact, I work with a lot of guys who are very highly functioning who have got to themselves to where they are by ignoring how they feel for so long. And they've accumulated great material wealth, but now they're confronting the fact that they feel terrible and they don't know how to be with themselves. So that's one extreme. The other extreme, what you see is like this new age, weepy, weak, really, like just lost in the sauce of emotion and behaving as if that's somehow a badge of honor. Like I see guys who are literally crying and then they take out their phones and record themselves crying and then post it. Like that makes me nauseous. So that's the other extreme, In the middle is what I think is skillful means, which is developing a very rich, palpable, moment-by-moment connection to your emotional feeling state, not only your own, but that of those around you, and then using that very useful information to navigate your course of action in the world and how you relate to other people. So we talk about sensitivity. I'm a martial artist. If you talk about sensitivity with regard to a martial art, it's feeling energy, knowing when your opponent's trying to push, so you pull. If he's trying to pull, then you push. You just feel the energy. But emotional sensitivity is the same thing. So I think that it is very useful to engage that dialogue with your emotions and to know that some days, you're not going to be able to do max output because you're feeling a little off, and let that be okay. That's more the saint side of things. Sometimes, the work needs to get done. It doesn't matter how you feel. The mission needs to be accomplished. That's the savage side of things. But remember, both are required.
That's a nice way.
And so I'll just say another thing is like the way we develop that very rich moment by moment connection to our feeling state is just through sitting. You just sit and you feel your body, my body, your body, the human body is the most highly attuned biological instrument in the known universe. It is absolutely amazing the sensations and vibrations that this thing is emanating moment by moment. Most of us, however, are just living from the neck up. We're disconnected to this thing. So the practice of just sitting every day is just inviting that information online. And some of that information is emotional. We'll also get an insight into, okay, if you are feeling some flavor of emotion, is this the result of my own thinking? Is it my own thinking that is perpetuating this emotion? Now I can know how to quiet the mind. Or is this something old that needs to be felt? And do I just need to feel this way for a period of time until it unwinds itself? So I really do feel that emotional sensitivity, emotional intelligence is a prerequisite to, freedom.
No, I mean, I like that because you don't have those high intensity moments anyways where you have to be a savage 24/7. And I agree, it probably will have a strain on you if you're savage
Totally.
at all times.
Totally.
There's got to be...
It's a tension. It's too tight. You can't maintain it.
You need the same.
Yeah. And the fear for highly functioning individuals is that if I were to practice this saintly capacity that I described of radical acceptance of myself in the world, then I would lose my fire, my discipline to move forward. And that's understandable, but the reality is when you entertain the possibility that you don't have to do anything, you don't have to improve anything, in fact, you couldn't, you're perfect, that reality is beautiful, that nothing needs to change, that is when you get infused with this real energy of love. And then you use that as the jet fuel to propel you in your mission, and you get shit done that you never thought possible. Because love is a much more infinitely renewable resource than discipline is. Discipline it'll run out. Love won't. The more you use, the more you get.
And we all get older.
Yeah.
And at some point, now I'm like 31 now, and I know, you cannot PR at all times.
No, dude.
And even if you put yourself with this, I have crazy discipline, but there's points where I know if I just keep pushing, I will just injure myself.
Totally.
So
that's the pivot that happens as you really start to find this balance between the savage and saint. Your workouts become less about proving anything or punishing yourself, and more about building yourself up. That doesn't mean that you just take it easy on yourself. Love sometimes pushes you into uncomfortable situations, but it doesn't hurt you. So you start to mature in the way that you look after your body. Sometimes push, sometimes relax, but it's a much more balanced way of being, because to your point, crushing it every day is just not sustainable.
No.
Sooner or later, you're gonna get...
No matter how disciplined.
Yeah.
Because then also you're like an idiot who just is gonna fuck, like the price will be much higher,
Right.
Because you will then suffer the consequences of maybe being injured for months.
Exactly.
And not being able to perform no matter what you want, like how bad you want it.
Or longer than months. You might get to your point, like you said, you're getting older. You're 31, I'm 30, I'll be 39 tomorrow. But as the years pass, you recognize that, okay, I have a teacher, martial art teacher, Dan Santo, he's in his 90s. He says every decade you really have to kind of re-examine your approach to your training.
Yeah.
Because time is the opponent that we all are really in battle with, and none of us will win. So how long do you want to stay in the game? If you train like you're 22 when you're 38, you might have to retire when you're 46. So I have a Tai Chi teacher who's he's probably 70 now, but he moves great because he's just consistently trains every day. But the intensity of his training just kind of waxes and wanes depending on his chi, his energy. He's in dialogue with his energy, and he's intentionally cultivating it rather than just going to the gym and just blowing his load like everyone does and then running yourself into a deficit.
It's almost like taking steroids will amplify you in a short time, but the consequences are detrimental.
Right.
And at the end, we're all running a war against time.
And it's a marathon, bro, not
Yeah.
a sprint. You see those guys in the gym, those old timers who have thick tendons, and you're just like, damn, you just been consistent for 40, 50 years. You never went too hard, but you always showed up.
Yeah.
You know, that's it. It's about longevity, not necessarily intensity. Intensity is an ingredient for longevity, but too much of a good thing is a bad thing.
Man. No, and there's also beauty in aging. It's not, of course, physically, it's a little scares me a little bit,
Sure.
but mentally and just overall, I it's hard to look back like when you were like in your 20s, you know, because just how you acted, you know, how I'm talking now, I'll look back on this and be like, wow, you know, in 10 years.
Yeah, probably.
Probably, but that's okay.
Yeah.
But there's some beauty in aging, I guess.
Sure. You're always doing the best you can with what you know at the time.
Yeah.
And they say youth is wasted on the young. And that's true. Whenever you look back on yourself, you say, God damn, if only I knew now what I didn't know then. If I could be 22, know now what I didn't know then, God damn, I'd be a superhero. But that's part of it. And another thing too is especially in this culture, aging and deteriorating are just so intimately connected, like it's a foregone conclusion. Now, yeah, as you age, your body changes and your physical capacities, diminish. But if you live right, like I'm gonna be 39 tomorrow. I look better and feel better than I did when I was 29, 28, because there are rules to the game. Like I mentioned them earlier. Sit still, occasionally, every day, just relax. Don't be constantly consumed with a screen, or just give your brain time to just chill. You can call that meditation or stillness practice, contemplation, whatever you want to call it, prayer. And then breathe, sleep, drink water, eat real food, and move. If you do those things every day as time passes, you don't age the way other people who aren't tapped into that are aging. So they say when you're a baby, you look like mommy and daddy. When you're 35, 45, you look like the decisions that you make every day. So look in the mirror and you tell me, are the decisions that you make every day working for you or not?
You said something really good. You said every day I can only give it my best.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is that who can say these days they're like gave it their all?
Yeah.
I feel like I get so frustrated with men these days because they go the easy route, they stay in the comfort, they cut themselves short, and they never really I see the potential.
Sure.
I think every man has a beautiful potential.
So I got a question for you, bro.
Yeah.
Who suffers that frustration?
Probably every man themselves.
No, you said you get so frustrated
Yeah.
with men these days. Who suffers that frustration?
I suffer that
You
frustration.
suffer that frustration. So it goes back to our earlier point. Let that go, man. Even the people who...
What if it's your brother?
Especially if it's your brother. I'm going to tell you right now, you don't get to be a prophet in your own kingdom. People pay me a lot of money for my perspective on things and to help them out. But they do that because they're at a point where they're ready. If you offer somebody advice, even if you see them clearly and you love them and you want the best for them and you know why they're suffering the way they're suffering and you know exactly how they could alleviate their suffering, but they didn't ask you for your help and they're not ready to be helped, then you sharing what you know only hurts them and you.
Yeah, it makes it even worse.
Yeah,
I feel like
exactly.
every time I take an approach, it feels like you lower them just a tiny little bit more.
You almost bolster their resistance.
Yes.
So the solution is for you, like we said, to focus on the man in the glass, to become as healthy, happy, and strong as you possibly can in so doing that, you probably will shift your perspective on that person who you think needs help, and maybe just learn to love them as they are. And in that softening, maybe they will come to you and say, yo, Candy, I see you, man. And I'm confused, and I was wondering if you could share some advice on this issue. And then you say, of course I could, man. Sit down. I'd be happy to. But if there's this judgment on, how you perceive they operate in the world, and you could do better and you should do this, nah, man, it doesn't help anybody. So the solution, as always, is to focus on you, amplify you, and then the people who are ready to be helped will find you. But we can't go around trying to help people who didn't ask for it, because nobody wins.
I couldn't agree more, and I learned that the hard way, I would say.
Yeah, we all do.
Right? Because it's painful to watch somebody you love wasting their time away when they could be so great.
Yeah.
And I see their suffering. It's not like, if somebody's doing their thing, I don't need everybody to freaking go do CrossFit and become like muscly and stuff. If you move and you control what you eat and you spend time outside in the sun,
Sure.
and you're not on your screen jerking off to degeneracy every day, I respect that. I respect somebody that takes care of themselves. But if you're just degenerate and toxic and you just do that every day, and I love you and I have to watch you do that, it's just hard.
Yeah.
It's hard for me.
It's hard for you.
And I don't want to be that person that is like, yo, like, do push-ups, get off the fucking couch. Like, that's a hard job too.
Right.
And because I guess the people that come to you, there is a readiness.
Sure.
Because they already did the first step of approaching you, looking into you, or at least being like, hey, I guess I need some sort of help. Like,
sure.
Right? You're not like approaching somebody like out of nowhere, showing
Right.
up and like being like, yo, it's time. You gotta check your G, right? Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't work like that.
But when it's family.
Well, it comes from a good place.
Yeah.
I can feel your heart, and it comes from a good place. You want the best for people.
Yes.
But sometimes even that desire becomes a perturbation for your inner peace and theirs. So the solution is one of the 3 primary skills that we cultivate in the formal meditation practice. Equanimity. The capacity to accept reality the way it is, the capacity to accept somebody the way they are, the capacity to love somebody the way they are. There's a specific mantra around cultivating equanimity. See if I can remember it. So, do you have a brother are you speaking about an actual person?
Yes.
Okay, so you would just kind of reflect upon your brother and then just let these words wash over you. Things are as they are. Things are impermanent. All beings are heir to their own decisions and actions. Your joy and your sorrow depend upon your decisions and actions, not upon my wishes for you. I love you, but I can't prevent your suffering. You let go of your preference around how that person should be and just love the person who's with you. And maybe they act in the world in a different way than you would act, but that's them and you're you. So it's tricky because your desire comes from a good place. It comes from your heart, but it causes tension in you. So you have to let it go. And you can make it known, somehow, some way that, hey, bro, if you ever need anything, I got your back. And then just leave it alone.
That's hard too.
It's hard, man. It's really hard. But that's the practice.
And it's hard to... I think I've learned to accept it now, but it's hard to surround yourself with somebody like that. It almost feels like, I don't know, me, my wife, my kid, everything is like a link.
Yeah.
In like a chain.
Sure.
Everybody works with each other. And then when another person comes into that space, it weakens everybody. It affects everybody. If one person is yawning around and being sloppy and and letting themselves go, eating unhealthy,
Maybe.
consuming like
Yeah.
social media on another level, being on a screen all the time in front of you, it triggers everybody compared to somebody who is, if I can see it clear how it affects my wife and my child when I wake up early, when I'm very strict with my health
Mm-hmm.
and very determined, even without telling them, they're like interested in it. It makes them
Sure, and it makes them, they're led by a man, the husband and the father that is they can trust. That's good. But just to bring it all the way back, the only thing that we can control is the way we react to things.
Yeah.
And so it is within your capacity to examine the reactivity that you have around the behavior of another individual. And perhaps, I don't want to do like a deep dive on you here, but I feel called to invite you into the inquiry. What does this person's behavior mean about me? Because I think that's what you're reacting to. And the reality is another person's behavior doesn't mean anything about you. It doesn't have anything to do with you. But it seems like there's some tension there, and there's a lot of charge around the choices that someone else makes, but it's got nothing to do with you.
Yeah, I guess it's because also like I feel some sort of like responsibility, I guess.
Yeah.
I used to be heavy in social media, spend a lot of time on my computer. And I feel like he saw me do that a lot when I was still at home, because I was just doing that every day and living a pretty unhealthy life, and everybody saw that. And
Sure.
once I left home and I started my own family, and COVID happened and I didn't see my family for a long time, now I did a really big change. Being a father really changed me.
Yeah.
And I guess that also it's a very complicated thing, because now I feel like I put influence on my brother when he was young, and then I left him and I grew, and he's still there where I heavily influenced him. So I have some sort of responsibility, and but at the end of the day, like you said, a lot of times you can only control me.
Yeah.
And at some point, I was wondering, like, is there some sort of way you can get somebody ready, or is it always going to be a patiently breathing and waiting patiently?
The practice is really to love people where they're at.
Yeah.
And you got to pick your battles. Like I said, if somebody comes to you and they want to change, and they're picking your brain about working out and stuff, and they're receptive, then by all means share everything you know. But sometimes skillful means is just to love somebody where they're at. Sometimes individuals have to live, in the dark for a while because they're being prepared to sprout. And, he may not be ready to sprout, or some people may not be ready to sprout, and some people may not need to. Not everybody needs to live the way you want to live or I want to live. The practice really is to love them where they are. And you're infinitely more useful when you can authentically do that. You're more helpful.
And I think...
And I will say this too. It comes from, I think for you, there's this invitation to really lean into this edge that you are perfect the way you are. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to go to the gym. You don't have to do a goddamn thing. And the more you can let that be true, not only will you go further on your purpose path, but the greater capacity you'll have to accept people who this version of you currently deems as weak, or you need to make changes, or all of those things. Because we don't see things as they are, we see things as we are. You look at the lens of reality through the same way you look at your own self.
That feels kind of good when you say everything is perfect the way it is.
Yeah. It's relaxing.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It makes you like all like...
Yeah. And then your ambitions, your personal ambitions become, well, maybe I could just make it just a little bit better. Just a little bit better. Not like this hard, like, I gotta conquer. I have to destroy. It's just your You move toward your ambitions more playfully because you already have contacted this inner state, this internal state that you just hinted toward. It feels relaxing. Everything's okay. So there's a levity attached to your ambitions because you don't really need anything to happen. The paradox is, as you approach your purpose from that place of not needing it, it becomes infinitely more likely to actually happen.
Because we have that inner resistance.
Yeah.
And sometimes, you want it so bad, but you cannot move.
Yeah.
But when you say everything is perfect, then you feel light and you feel like you can approach, well, now that I'm perfect or things are perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Like, let's say somebody going to the gym, if you feel I'm perfect, then nothing can hold me of going to a gym and approaching a workout.
Right.
On the other hand, where maybe I want it so bad, but I feel like I'm not good enough, you might never enter the door.
Or if your constant kind of internal commentary is, I look like shit, I got to make changes,
Yes.
then you're just going to be another person who's ripped, looks amazing, but through their eyes, they see a spare tire. It's never good enough. So what do we want? We want that feeling of radical acceptance of self and world. That's the only reason that we do anything. The paradox is the feeling is always and only available right now. We make it like a carrot at the end of the stick, and we have to jump through all these hoops to get the feeling. But if we would just reward ourselves with the feeling now and practice it deliberately, because you're going to get good at whatever you practice. So practice the possibility somatically with your body and your breath and your gaze that it's all good. And then go out into the world and share the medicine that you are. That practice does not co-sign all the injustices in the world and say, oh yeah, well, it's all fine. No, it doesn't. But if you contact that relaxed state of peace, of mental clarity, then you're infinitely more capable of correcting the imbalances in the world because you yourself are at ease. It's almost like this, bro. You start, as you just rest into the moment, you just become heavy. Like you can feel a man who's grounded, who's present. He's heavy, like a concentrated dose, like he's all the way here. That individual just kind of sits a little heavier in the fabric of space and time. And then the things that he's after just kind of roll toward him because he's not chasing anything, So that's the practice.
So what are the first steps you do when somebody approaches you?
One of the first steps, the first practices that I always suggest is what I call the grandfather practice, which is basically what we just discussed. So you wake up in the morning, at some point during your morning regimen, you will find yourself in the bathroom to take a piss or brush your teeth. Take a minute, 30 seconds. Make eye contact with yourself in the mirror and imagine this. Imagine that you've been a diligent meditator for 50, 60, 70 years. You've done everything right every day to deeply evolve your consciousness. And you are actually an 85-year-old man. You're the future version of yourself, the highest possible ideal. Imagine that you are that being looking at your reflection in this present moment. What do you think that evolved version of yourself would have to say to you? Don't be a pussy. You got to get to the CrossFit gym. Cut the bullshit. You think so? I don't think so.
I don't think so.
No, I don't think he would say a damn thing, really. He would probably just hit you with that heart energy. He would probably think that whatever you're worried about in this moment is probably comical from the perspective that he's achieved. He would probably think that your physicality is amazing. He's now at 85, 90 years old. He's like, God damn, look at me when I was 31. I was a fucking beast. He would probably hype you up. He would probably encourage you to keep going, keep striving. And I love you no matter what. And so you build that reservoir of positive regard inside yourself, and you start to talk to yourself the way you would talk to somebody who loves you and wants the best for you. That doesn't mean that you're going to take naps and not get anything done. Sometimes you got to work a little harder, but come on, you can do it. You can do it. But you push yourself from a place of love. And for a lot of people, that practice that I just described, myself included, it feels weird, gross, and like you're crazy. What the fuck am I doing? I'm looking at myself in the mirror, trying to imagine I'm an old man. Like, wow, I really lost my marbles this time. So is it a little weird? Yeah. But is it any crazier than walking around planet Earth and talking shit to yourself inside? Isn't that weird? Isn't that actually crazy? So this practice is actually the practice of becoming sane, of practicing, because this is a critical point. Deliberately practice. We're going to get good at whatever we practice, so we have to be very intentional with what we choose to practice. And so practicing this building of a solid structure within you that wants the best for you and encourages you, it's very important. Because as you start to push yourself gently, lovingly, but firmly, and know when actually it's best not to push yourself, it's best to comfort yourself, now you become balanced, savage, and sane. And now you can offer that same love, care to other people. You become, the medicine because you're growing it in you.
Seems like almost like when you talk to a child,
Exactly.
you have the perspective.
Yeah.
Everything my son does is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean he's gonna be a fuck up. It means now that he has this full acceptance and everything is beautiful because he just is.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't perform on any high level or solve any problems or
Exactly.
rescue anything or make a lot of money. He makes no money at all. Right?
Yeah.
So
there's no conditions
there's
placed on your loving acceptance of him.
Unconditional. I guess that's what we all want, is unconditional love. Maybe just mostly from ourselves.
Exactly, which is what I said earlier. That's what we want, and everything we do is in an effort to get that. But there's nothing that we can do or have to do to get it.
Yeah.
So why not start every day giving yourself the thing that you want most, and then having gotten the thing that you want most, watch what you're capable of in the world.
That's why we love our moms the most, because it's unconditional.
Yeah.
Unconditional, whatever you do, she'll always love you.
Mm-hmm.
But then most people just hate themselves.
Yeah, and that's a uniquely modern Western problem. I think I've heard it said that someone asked once the Dalai Lama about self-loathing, and he didn't even know what they were talking about. They didn't really have a cultural reference for hating yourself.
Yeah.
So, a lot of the health problems that we face are an inevitable consequence of our culture. So, I'll often say that, do most people look at themselves in the mirror and try to build themselves up with unconditional loving acceptance? No, they don't. But if you look at the average person in this culture, they're not doing so well. God bless them, God love them, but people are hurting. Overweight, mental, emotional disturbances are the norm. So if you would want vibrant, vital energy coursing through your veins in a culture where that is not the norm, then you have to do shit that is not normal, okay? And everything that I suggest people do ain't normal. But if you want to be normal, really look at what normal is these days. No one should be striving to be normal. I like people like you who ain't normal at all.
Yeah, I never strive for being normal.
Nah.
No, I had never blending in and being normal, because look at everybody. Like you said, doesn't seem very attractive to me to be normal.
Yeah, people, a lot of people aren't doing so great.
Yeah.
And the best way to help those people is to fill yourself up with vitality, so you have enough gas in the tank to be useful.
And I guess all kinds of men approach you, right? It's not the overweight nerd that is like obviously unhealthy that approaches you. I guess it's probably maybe people that have muscles, maybe people that
Definitely.
are successful in their job and make millions of money,
Definitely.
you know?
So I would say two major populations of men come to my work.
Yeah.
Guys who are really, really struggling, who really just can't seem to get in the game, depressed, maybe overweight, just really hurting, major, big suffering. And then at the other end of the spectrum are guys who, from the outside looking in, you would think, bro, you cracked the code. Like, you got it. You're a multimillionaire. You have all the things. You're at the top of your respective field, whether that's entertainment, athletics, entrepreneurial, tech, all those guys. But those guys know that actually things ain't it, because they get all the things and they're confronted with this very harsh insight that I still feel shitty, and actually this empire that I've built has become kind of a prison that I can't free myself from. And then there's the whole, middle of the road population where things aren't so great, but they're not so bad. And so great success or great suffering is really what catalyzes like a deep dive into what is going on here. And so those two populations who are seemingly opposite but very, very similar are the individuals who come to my work mostly.
And then maybe we go back to what made you tap in,
Sure.
because that's always a very it's crazy how like it's always so like when you said like sometimes we have to wait until somebody's ready.
Yeah.
So it's always a beautiful, like there's a beautiful moment where you become ready,
Sure.
which can be crucial to a man and his life and
Yeah.
his impact on the world.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of men had those, and a lot of men are still waiting on that. So maybe
And
you share
sometimes,
your
yeah, I will. But sometimes we try to save somebody from having that moment,
yeah,
right? Which is what will catalyze their greatness.
or we try to push them to that moment, which
Yeah.
doesn't really work.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm born and raised in Philadelphia, and I guess it was like between the years of probably like 16 to 22, I got myself in a lot of trouble. I was getting arrested, getting in fights, and the altercations that I was having and the problems that I was getting into with the law were getting increasingly more severe, to the point where at one point my operating system was like, well, this is just my wild youth. I'm just acting reckless because that's what you do when you're 21 years old. And at some future moment, this all will just kind of resolve itself. But it became clear to me that this is not going to resolve itself. I got to make some changes. And I wanted to make changes, but my mind seemed to have a mind of its own. And I kept doing shit, like getting shit-faced and getting in fights that I didn't want to be doing. But it was like, who's in control here? What's going on? I had no ability to like correct my course. And I didn't have any love for the man in the mirror. Like, I really didn't like myself. And it got really difficult to manage myself. It got difficult to be me. It felt very bleak. I didn't know how much longer can I live like this? This is actually kind of miserable. It is miserable. I mean, it wasn't like my 24/7 feeling, but there were really dark moments where I felt maybe it would just be better if I just wasn't around. And I'd always kind of felt called to, Eastern mysticism. I was always kind of in the background fascination. And I definitely occupied that population that I spoke about earlier, where, deep suffering motivated my inquiry into spirituality. And I started to read about meditation. I started to practice a bit on my own as best I knew how. And then I ended up moving. I left Philly and moved to LA with my best friend. And I didn't know, man, I just knew that things weren't going so great for me, and maybe I need to change my environment so I can help me find myself. I thought maybe I'd come out to LA for 6 months or a year and then just have an interesting life experience and go back. But that was 14 years ago. So things worked out. I had the good fortune of finding some really, really good meditation teachers. George Haas, Shinzen Young, the late, great Dan Brown. And these individuals are like, look, this is Southern California. You and I could probably take a walk to the coffee shop and pass 4 meditation teachers on the way. So not everybody knows what the fuck they're talking about. Honestly, most people don't. But I was very lucky to find some elders who knew what the fuck they were talking about. And the practice, slowly but surely, started to kind of change my relationship to my own thoughts, to my own self. I started to contact deeper layers of myself and allow emotional vestiges to unwind. Was called to retreat practice, went on a couple of long meditation retreats, and there was no moment during any of this time where it was like the clouds open, the sun shines forth, and everything is healed and illuminated. No, it's just a very gradual shift in the perspective over the course of time to the point where the man I am now and the man I was then are radically different. Also, at around that time, I really took up a diligent inquiry and training into martial art. So I got really into Muay Thai kickboxing and competed in Muay Thai. I study and continue to study Filipino martial art and Pencak Silat and Tai Chi and Qigong. And I noticed that through the martial art practice, it was a therapy, an exorcism of all this emotional gunk. And that was the safe place in the container to just let it rip, man, and even hard spar and try to take somebody's head off. And it was so healing. The paradox of the martial art is speaking for myself, what gets your foot in the door is you want to be a macho type. You want to be the baddest dude in the room. You don't want anybody to fuck with you. You want to be able to fuck somebody up. Let's be honest. That was 100% fact for me. But then, as you actually start to cultivate any competency with regard to jacking somebody up, that's a slow process and a humbling process, because you have to be humbled by the more advanced students in your academy who are going to be beating you up along the way. So by the time you become any good, you've been humbled. And the paradox of the martial artist is the greater your skill and the application of violence, the more peaceful you become, the less it really ever even occurs to you, to the point where at one point in your life, I mean, bro, for real, I would walk down the street and constantly be hyper vigilant around what I would do if somebody attacked me. But now I don't even think about it. I never even think about it. So those two paths really inform my work and my view, the martial path and the path of meditation. And through the years, they've just really simultaneously hardened me and softened me to the point where I'm very happy with the man that I am. I'm still engaged in the process of, healing my blind spots and becoming better, but at the same time, I have love for the man in the glass. That wasn't always the case in my life. And honestly, I told you I moved out to LA 14 years ago. If I was to sit across from the young man who was driving through Kansas to get here and tell him how I earn my living in the world right now and who I am and what I do, it wouldn't have made any sense to him at all. Because I didn't set out to do this, bro. I just chased the things that I was passionate about, and in doing that, this career just built itself around me. And now I'm really stoked about it.
So would you say it's like a man is always at war? There's like some sort of primal instinct, and we used to go to war or go on a hunt, some sort of like mission, some sort of like goal where you're on a journey, and you have a clear path where you're gonna direct your anger, your testosterone, your power
Mm-hmm.
towards.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like that can be found in any kind of exercise, martial art. But if you don't have an outlet, you become a danger to yourself and to society.
I couldn't say it better myself, man. I would 1000% co-sign that. I think that, you can almost think of it like a pit bull or a Rottweiler or a Doberman. You know, I think that aggression and, this drive to compete and conquer is very natural and exists in all men. And in some proportions, some men have that energy more than others do. And like, those dogs, you got to take those dogs to the park and give them a tire to chew on or something. Otherwise, they're going to rip your apartment apart. So I think it is a man's responsibility to know himself and to know that, yeah, okay, if you have that tenacity, then you got to give it a park to play in. And martial art, I think, is the best park for that puppy to snarl a little bit. And like I said, it makes you actually exorcising that energy in a healthy way makes you infinitely more peaceful. And if you don't, yeah, like you said, you become a danger to yourself and others because it could reverberate back against you. And you start really, being hypercritical or aggressive towards yourself. Not necessarily physical, but mental, emotional. Or you become the kind of guy who snaps at his kid or scares his wife or fucking gives somebody the finger in traffic and gets in a road rage altercation. The paradox is, like I'm telling you, real fighters, real martial artists, they don't do that shit. They just don't. It doesn't even occur to them because they're massaging that part of themselves at the academy or at the dojo, frequently. So yeah, I think that modern culture doesn't really encourage or have a lot of avenues for that healthy expression, where there was a time in human history where it was just part of the day, really. The biology that we're working with is still very much the same. It's just the daily life is very different. And that the gap between those two creates a lot of problems.
When you said that you also work holistic, do you also work like with specific like substances to amplify?
I
that,
don't.
or-
Yeah, I mean, I have used and experimented with various plant medicines. Most of them, I don't know. And they've been very useful on my journey. But I always make this caveat, and it's not something that I introduce in my practice with people that I work with. It's not part of my work, and I'm not really called to it. But what I see in that world is, the real cures, the real solutions to our problems, like I said, are free and they're boring. And they require consistent daily effort. And that's not very sexy. Way sexier is some fucking cactus juice that I can drink and know God, and then all my problems go away for 72 hours. And then it starts to wear off. And I think maybe I'd like to go to another ceremony. And then people continue to show up to the medicine as if it's a panacea that will cure their problems. But the medicine shows you where you're out of balance. And the ceremony begins after the journey. And you have to actually do the boring, mundane work that you've been shown you have to do. And then maybe 6 months or a year and a half or 3 years go by and you feel called to another journey. And so you do it. But I think few and far between is the skillful means. You're a weightlifter. Plant medicines are the supplements on the spiritual path. They're not the weights, you know? The supplements can make the work that you're doing with the weights can amplify them. But the supplements themselves
Don't do anything.
they don't do much. So, you know, that's the real work. Because I've seen people kind of just spiral out into that. And to them, they think they're getting closer to something, but they're really just getting further away from the ground. And they're losing contact with, you know, reality. And it's unfortunate to see. So I never recommend plant medicine, but I would never talk someone out of it. It's something that if you know you're ready, then heed the call. But my advice would be let it be a while before you step back in the circle.
And it's again the easy way,
Yeah,
the easy fix, the quick fix,
right.
and not the hard work.
Yeah,
Because the hard work is it's so boring and unsexy, like you said.
Yeah.
Like everybody loves like pulling like heavy weights. Nobody shows themselves stretching at night and, you know, going in the cold plunge and
right.
eating like the same food every day, you know.
Or
like-
doing an exercise with a very moderate resistance with very good form.
yeah,
You
or
know?
the
Yeah.
the warming up.
Yeah,
over
the
and
stuff that
over.
works is boring.
Yeah,
This is what works. Consistency.
yeah.
You know, doing the right things every day for long swaths of time. That's the lever to pull. That will have a marked impact on your life. But it requires effort. That's why another thing is that I really want to put this out there into the world, like with regard to meditation. I'm on a mission to make meditation badass again, because it is badass to show up and sit, you know, just sit, and nothing really changes. The progress is slow, but it's the consistency. And, you know, there are times in human history where it was just accepted that, yeah, meditation is for warriors. It's for badasses. And by the way, if you don't think it's for badasses, then try it. You know, I mentioned I've been on meditation retreats. First one I ever went on was 3 days, traditional silent meditation retreat. And then, you know, it was miserable. It was hard. It was fucking boring. It was probably 12 years ago. But my experience was basically I was just fighting my own brain 24/7, just wanting to jump out of my own skin. Nothing magical happened. But only after that experience, when I returned to, you know, my everyday life, I noticed it's hard to articulate, but there's just a little bit more space. There's a little less reactivity. There's a little more, I don't know, something happened. I don't know what happened, but this is worth exploring. So then a 3-day retreat becomes a 7-day retreat, becomes a 2-week retreat, a 1 month over the years. And I can remember I was working as a fitness trainer back at this time and telling my people, yeah, I'm going to be out of town for 2 weeks. I'm going on a retreat. And they would say, oh, so nice. Must be nice to have that kind of time. Lucky you. And in my head, I would think, motherfucker, this shit is fucking hard. It's not relaxing at all. It's fucking, you feel like you're going insane. You know, retreat ain't even the right word. It's an advance. So I like to share that practice through that lens with rough and tumble dudes like you who, you know, have that warrior archetype in them. And my invitation is to channel that into the sitting practice. You know, it's not namaste, blessings, grand rising. No, it ain't like that. It's hardcore, for real. So I like to call forth, like, I'm trying to work with veterans, first responders, fighters. Like, let's make meditation badass again.
I like that. And it's hardcore.
Yeah.
For sure.
To me, it's the ultimate, man. It's the ultimate. Really, what you're doing at the highest level is becoming so concentrated. You become like a spear that pierces ordinary reality. and you start to have some pretty psychedelic experiences. And it occurs to you, well, I didn't take anything. You're starting to see reality the way it really is, and you realize that reality is the ultimate trip. You know, you look at these monastics, spend their whole lives in deep practice. Those are the real warriors of planet Earth, man. And those dudes are tripping their balls off 24/7 because their perception has become so refined that they're seeing the ultimate reality. That's always available, always right here, always right now.
And especially with guys, I feel like a lot of times, well, men have the most problem with addressing that.
Yeah,
Sitting still,
yeah,
doing nothing,
right.
when you have to be such a workhorse and always perform.
Yeah, and so here's the thing. It's not obvious immediately, but it becomes obvious through consistent practice, is that the more time you allow yourself to rest deeply, to relax deeply. And I don't mean sit in the lazy boy and watch Netflix. I mean total, utter, deep relaxation of complete stillness. That's like, that state is like a deep tissue massage or a warm bath that just regenerates you to the point where you come out of that into your life and your productivity skyrockets only because you allow for the period of regeneration. I think it was Abraham Lincoln said something like, if you give me 6 hours to chop down trees, I'll spend 4 hours sharpening the axe. So meditation is sharpening the axe. What is the common denominator in all of your aspirations with regard to your fitness, your career, your work, you're a husband, you're a father? The unifying thread in all of them is your mind. So if you sharpen the axe of your mind, you get better at all the things that you do by extension. We engage the practice of meditation not to become good meditators or not to trip out in transcendent states on the pillow, but so that we become solid, concentrated, clear, vital men when we come out of the formal practice period and step into our lives. You know, the practice makes you a better man. And that's been made abundantly clear in my personal experience. I don't know where I would be if things didn't get bad enough that I thought it was a good idea to go out in the desert for 3 days with a bunch of hippies. Because the whole time I was there, I was thinking to myself, what the fuck happened to you, bro? You're from Philly. You're out at Joshua Tree with these goddamn hippies meditating. You fucking lost your shit. So I get that. And I get that resistance that guys have for it. And that's why I feel like I'm in a position to like say, no. Lean into the resistance. There's medicine here. And you got to be a savage to sit into it. So I talked a bit about martial art and meditation. And at the surface level, that's what Savage Saint seems to be. Okay, so you're a Muay Thai instructor, that's Savage. And you're a meditator, that's Saint. But nah, man, it really ain't that black and white. If you really think about it, you know, here's what's become clear to me in recent history. If you have the good fortune to encounter an individual who has authentic, bright, smiling eyes and just a peaceful affect, and actually just their presence just somehow kind of uplifts your nervous system a bit, and that you can feel that they're like actually enthusiastic and joyful, you've met a savage. Because that state doesn't just happen. It must be practiced. And if you meet an individual like that, know that they have relentlessly practiced cultivating that energy with every passing moment. They've been at battle moment by moment by moment, learning how to play that song with their nervous system. That's a savage, for real. So the savage is saying it's like the yin yang symbol. The savage energy is hiding right there in the eyes of the saint. And sometimes the flip side is also true. You can make of yourself a man who is strong and capable of fucking somebody up with driven by the intention to protect the people you love and to keep the peace. And you might find yourself in a situation where you could hurt somebody. And in this body of the savage there, you see the twinkle in the eye of the saint. And you don't hurt them, but you let them know, nah, bro, you don't want to do that. And they know, and you know. And nobody had to get hurt, but everybody got the memo. See what I'm saying? That's the savage and saint.
So going back to, like you said, you came to LA, you thought it might just be the experience, but then you stayed.
Yeah.
But is there like a specific, like when were, like you said that you couldn't have like been going, it was miserable at times. You were really questioning how long you can like live this miserable life.
Yeah.
But what's the turning point where you switch it up?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that earlier, like that there's this one come to Jesus moment. And I don't know that I had that. I guess the last time I got locked up, I got into a high-speed chase with the cops and almost hit a cop car and killed myself and 2 cops. And so that was kind of like a pattern interrupter, like, all right, you got to make some changes. So I think I can look back to that as like the moment where a deep decision about altering the trajectory that I was on was made. But even once that decision was made, I mean, that just led me into the hard work of getting myself together. So,
but there was a limit.
Yeah,
it was like, this is too much.
I think that experience was, the moment where I recognized that this is not going to figure itself out. You got to make some changes, and if you don't, your future ain't going to be bright, man. And so it was around that time that I had been an athlete, like high school athlete, and then I think I lost the identity of being an athlete and the mission that I felt as a young man, like, oh yeah, I'm a football player, I'm a basketball player, I got to train. And that was taken from me. I just kind of wandered aimlessly, and alcohol, marijuana, just kind of, I got lost in the sauce. But then like after that experience of getting in trouble and recognizing I got to make some changes, the gym really saved me. I got back into the weight room and like really got after it. I had like a physical transformation in a pretty short amount of time, like probably 6 months. I maybe lost like, I don't know, I don't remember, but like 40, 50 pounds. I got in my Rocky Balboa era, jogging and weight training and all of it. And so that addressed, like I started to cultivate the physical. But as you know, man, you can see a lot of traumatized individuals in the gym who are pretty fit, but not very healthy. And so then I was like, all right, I also got to dig into like this emotional stuff. And like I said, the meditation and moving to LA and finding the right teachers, learning more about who I am and how I am, and developing a real coherent narrative around oneself, like looking back in time and seeing yourself almost objectively. Learning how you came to think the way you think and be the way you are, and some of the trouble that you got into. This all becomes clear to a man if he would just stop and sit still for a little while.
But it seems like that I think everybody has experienced this like a warning shot.
Yeah.
Call it God or the universe or the Jesus moment, but like just like a moment in life where you get so close to something terrible.
Yeah.
But then it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
You get away.
Yeah.
You get away with it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's when you make a choice. You either keep going or you take the other way.
Yeah.
And I think at that point you're ready. And at that point you can go as far as you want the other direction, really.
Totally.
And everything falls into place naturally. But it takes this moment where you look the devil in the eye for a second, and then he still turns away from you, kind of.
Yeah, that's well said.
He didn't take you. I've had like many moments of that, I think, where
Yeah.
I get like I'll never forget this, but like there's moments that are like they're like so dark, and you're like, this could have been it.
Exactly. Yeah, it's
I
like,
could have died, or I
yeah.
could have hurt somebody really bad, and I'm like, what am I doing? Like,
right.
and you like almost awaken, and you look at yourself, not as an outer body experience, more like and you know what's right,
Right.
and you know what to do, and it will take a lot of effort to to say no to that and keep going and do it again. And sometimes you do, and you get another chance. You again almost go there.
Totally.
Like you got arrested many times, right? And you again, it is so close.
Yeah.
And it almost seems like there's many chances you get to redeem yourself. Even when things seem so bad, you still get a shot again.
Yeah. I know I got a lot of chances. I think you're right. You get those moments, those experiences where you think, God damn, I rolled the dice with my life.
Yes.
And my life wasn't taken, but not because of me, just because of luck. And then, I think for
Luck
me,
or God.
luck, God, yeah, call it whatever, but not because of you.
No.
You put yourself
You
in a
fucked up.
position to die
Yeah.
or to endure a catastrophe,
Yeah.
and it didn't happen. So that's where the expression, there but for the grace of God go I. Because sometimes I hear stories about things that happened to somebody, and I think to myself, God damn that. There's no reason why that shouldn't have happened to me. There before the grace of God go I. And then, you just have compassion for the mistakes of other people because you recognize it could have happened to you just as well. Just got lucky.
Oh, and I think those moments are crucial to make a
Totally.
change.
Yeah, and I can look back at a more difficult chapter of my life and recognize now, from the perspective of where I am now, it's like, oh yeah, had to. Couldn't have been any other way because I needed to endure that. I needed to know what that's like, really know it, live it, so that I can be more useful to individuals who are in that way of being now. And that shared experience, I know exactly how to help you come forth into a more beautiful experience of your own life. It is possible. I know that.
Man, so my brother is 10 years younger.
Mm-hmm.
For 10 years, I was the only child.
Mm-hmm.
Then he was here. Probably the best thing that could have happened to me, but also the most difficult thing.
Sure.
Like you said, things are never black and white. There's always greatness in darkness.
Definitely.
And I'll never forget this. He was in front of the house, and he must have been like 5. I was 15, and I throw a stick, and it lands right under his eye. And I don't even remember why I threw the stick. I just threw it. Didn't think about it. But it lands, it twirls, and then hits him like this close to his eye. And I'll never forget, it was like a moment of stillness where I was like, what the fuck am I doing? Like,
Yeah.
I'm reckless.
Yeah.
I don't think about my actions at all. I could have changed my brother's life forever.
Totally.
Right? Man, and yeah, that's just one moment where I remember where you really have to like dig deep and be like, that's not who I want to be.
It's interesting. Life hands you those moments of...
And then nothing happened, and then we went to the hospital and they checked it, and it was like, they sent us back home, and they're like, and I'm like, I sit back at home, and it's like whoosh.
I-
This was that close.
I can relate.
You already almost fucked somebody's life up forever.
Not quite as severe, but with I have a little brother too, and there's just about a year between us. And I was always, I'm larger than he is, and I was a bit of a bully probably as an older brother. I didn't let anybody ever bully him, but I was probably a bit of a tyrant when we were growing up. But anyway, I remember this one time we're playing basketball and we get in an argument, which is pretty typical. We're pretty young. I don't know, like 11, 12, something. And I jack him up and throw him into a pine tree, and he starts crying. And at that moment, our neighbor across the street hears him crying, and she just looked at me. She didn't like walk across the street or anything. It's not her place, but she just looked at me with like disgust. And I never forgot it. Like, I felt it. Like, she just looked at me like and shook her head like, you're a bad boy or something.
Yeah.
And I looked at my brother and saw him crying in the pine tree, and I was just like you just expressed, it was like this radical moment of clarity. Like, that's your brother. Don't treat him like that. And I can't say that, I never once again argued or anything with him. We would still argue, but there was definitely a shift in my being in that moment that I never forgot. It was a moment of clarity.
No, and it's respect for yourself, and then towards the outside.
Yeah.
You're like, first you have to like respect yourself that you're not this person,
Right.
and then you can be good to your brother, kind of. And I also remember, like, it wasn't really my parents like telling me like to not do that, or that doesn't really change anything. Like, it was really like where you like talk to yourself for a moment, and you're like,
Totally.
you have this moment where you're like, I don't want to be a fuck up.
Yeah.
No matter how many times somebody told you to not be a fuck up and not fuck up and not do this, kind
It's
of.
way different when it comes from you, but it's almost like it doesn't come from you. It comes from comes through you.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like something more powerful guiding your path.
And you have this moment of clarity.
Yeah. Maybe you could say it's your soul, or maybe it's that grandfather. Here's something I thought about, as I encourage people into this grandfather practice that we talked about earlier, and one that I do every day. Really imagine that you did undertake these diligently these practices every day for the next 60 years. I don't think it's so far-fetched to imagine that version of you could actually, in the depths of his stillness, reach backward in time and talk to you now. And maybe that's what those moments of clarity are. I will say this, bro.
Because how can you have this clarity as a child?
Yeah.
This profound self-reflection.
Right. So...
because you look at yourself profound, right? You take a step back, you see yourself, and you almost like make a pact with yourself.
Yeah.
Never again.
And there's the experience of your own thought, but those moments of clarity seem to come from somewhere deeper than thought, somewhere precognitive. Look, I have a natural aversion to pseudo-spiritual science. When people kind of get lost in the Kool-Aid and talk about kooky stuff with regard to meditation and spirituality. I think, honestly, it turns most people off, especially the kind of individuals that I work with. However, the more I learn, the less I know. The more I relax into this present moment, the less fixed my views are around what's possible and what isn't.
I gotta tell you one more story. So I come from a town, there's no guns. Nobody has guns. It's not a thing. It's like very hard to get like a hunting license, and like only the cops have guns, and it doesn't really occur to me. So fast forward, I'm in Berlin studying photography. I have two friends from South Africa. They want to shoot a music video. I'm so down. They want to shoot this like point of view. I have a GoPro on my head, and there's guns involved, fake guns. So I get these fake guns from Amazon. The music video starts in front of the house, and then the rest is in the apartment. but they wanted that scene just to start in front of the house.
Mm-hmm.
So we were in front of the house with fake guns. Just no red thing on the front, like how it is in America.
Right. They look real.
Yeah. Neighbor sees it, calls the cops. We just stand there. We're about to shoot. We see a cop car like fly by, blue lights. I was pointing at it. I was like, oh, look, there's got to be something happening down there to my friends, right? Next thing you know, there's 5 cops running towards us with their guns out.
Oof.
And I'll never forget how beautiful that moment was. I'll never want to have it again, but there was some sort of the time stopped
Yeah.
when I was at gunpoint,
Yeah.
and I wasn't scared. I wasn't afraid at all.
Mm-hmm.
They hold us at gunpoint, and I remember that I was like floating. Everything was like in slow-mo. I slowly went to the ground.
Right.
I felt like my chest like against the asphalt, and they put handcuffs on me, and I was just laying there, and I was like just so happy to be alive and that they didn't shoot me.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was the most beautiful awakening, or like how you say like everything is perspective, and like
Right.
when you have these moments where you're like, wow, I'm breathing, I'm here, I just exist, and I didn't get shot in that moment.
Yeah. So I would imagine that what happened in that moment was the intensity of the moment. There's 5 cops sprinting at you with their guns drawn. The intensity of that moment demands the fullness of your attention. So you became radically and totally present. You were highly concentrated, because if 5 men are running at you with guns, you're not thinking, I wonder what I'm going to have for lunch. You know what I mean? That demands everything that you are is saturated into that experience. That is a state that can be trained and replicated. That's none other than high concentration.
Yeah.
So concentration is a skill. That's the primary skill that you developed in the formal period of meditation practice, so that your concentration becomes so strong that you can have that internal experience while you're making your eggs in your liver in the morning. You can be all the way saturated in the experience of the moment, such that there's not even one iota of bandwidth left over for internal commentary about something else. That's the flow. And that state is available at all times in all situations. A lot of people come to meditation practice because of an experience like that, whether it's like a car accident or something traumatic, where strangely enough, they report it as being one of the most pleasant experiences they've ever had, because it's just presence. In the absolute immediacy of this present moment, there is no problem. And the more we can surrender, really, totally into this, the less we suffer. And you were shown that by 5 dudes running at you with their gats out.
Have you read the Power of Now?
I knew you were going to say that. Yeah, actually, that book, I read that when I was like probably 19 years old.
Holy shit.
And I don't even know how it popped up on my radar. But that is really the book that kind of got me thinking about some other things. That was such a radical concept to me at the time, that this is the only thing, the only experience that actually exists, that past and future exist only as mental constructs. I remember reading that I was probably 19 or 20, and I was like, what? That knocked my socks off. So that's an amazing book. And I actually went to see Eckhart Tolle was recently in Los Angeles, maybe like 5-6 months ago. I went to hear him speak.
No way.
Yeah.
Wow.
But so anyway, he's an example of an individual who is, awakened, very wise. But if you look at Eckhart Tolle, it's almost like he has ignored the fact that he has a human body. He's just a quiet little. And so what I want to do is I want to let guys know that you don't have to meditation is not going to make you be like that.
No.
You can still be strong. You can still be, heavy.
Yeah.
You can still be
You don't
a
have to
man.
sit on a bench for weeks.
Exactly.
But he did that.
Yeah, he did that. I mean, he had a popping out. He had an awakening experience that he wasn't training for. He wasn't engaged in meditation to bring that state about. His suffering reached a point where it was so intense that he popped out of it into an altered state. And like you said, he just sat on a bench for a couple of weeks, just blissed out. Yeah. And that happens to people. Yeah. Some people, I've had my teachers told stories of individuals who have experiences of awakening, and they're told by psychology that they have a dissociative disorder. And then they go to a Zen temple or something, and the teacher there says, oh, no, this is what happens. This is where you're at on the map. This is how you got to stabilize it, and this is what you need to do. So it is interesting, I find, that these age-old traditions, monastic traditions, spiritual traditions, have the map from how to get to, ordinary reality of a fixated separate self to a more liberated experience. It's possible. Enlightenment isn't like this thing that you need to go live in a cave in the Himalayas for 80 years. It's just a widening of your perspective about who you are that happens as a consequence of consistent practice.
What are your tricks, or how do you practice presence? Because it seems like enlightenment is the end of suffering, and suffering is in the future, in the past, and created in the mind. So if you're fully present, there's no suffering.
Yeah.
And sometimes in this digital world, it is just challenging. It's really easy to be present when I remember like being a Boy Scout, and like you just chop up wood or you make a fire, and that's all you do.
Yeah.
And you're so present.
Yeah.
And everything is, every little tree, every little wind that you feel, everything is profound. And you have a task because you got to survive. You have a couple boys. Everybody does something. Some people are better at hunting. Some people are better at gathering things and putting up the tents or whatever. And everybody, there's nothing special happening at all. Mm-hmm. It's the most boring thing, but it's profound. And there's a big state of presence, I remember, back then.
Definitely.
Yeah, especially no phones.
Yeah.
No emails, no calls.
Yeah.
No bullshit.
Yeah, nature has that capacity to really relax the nervous system.
Yeah.
And open you to a perceptual experience that's a little bit different than you might have in a busy city.
Yeah. So for you personally, do you have, because I have like tricks like the cold plunge.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I wake up sometimes I feel like almost like a fever, like I'm so inflamed.
Yeah.
I feel hot. And I feel that need to check my phone and check what happened.
Totally.
Didn't go on my phone, on social media, the news, nothing for like 12 hours. So I have this need to check it. And then I feel even worse once I check it, right? And nothing happened anyways.
Right.
Especially not to me.
Right.
Maybe to somebody else, but not to me personally. Anyways, then I go into the cold plunge. And I have this sensation. Nothing changed, but everything changed, because now I step out and I'm happy to be alive. I was just shocked.
Yeah.
My whole system was in shock and like almost like like the liver freaks out and sends out all these hormones. Your dopamine shoots up, your adrenaline shoots up, and you're like, and you also breathe for the first time. I see that it's like it's also like forcing you to properly breathe, because we have this shallow breathing. As soon as you step in the 37 Fahrenheit, you're like,
Exactly.
and like for the first time, your oxygen rushes to your brain, and I emerge fully. My favorite part is putting my brain in the cold. And when I step out after 3 minutes, I feel blissed, happy to be alive, grateful for my physique, for another day, the sunlight. So this is like an easy trick for me for presence.
Yeah.
Same with going to the gym, when there is an intense workout and there's no more space to be on the phone. That's why I prefer CrossFit, because it forces, once the timer goes on, there's no more time to check your phone or to do a break or anything, and then it's just me against the time. So I do these kind of things, but I haven't meditated since a long time.
Well, I mean, meditation doesn't need to be sitting in lotus position on a meditation cushion.
Yeah.
Meditation is bringing the fullness of your attention to a given stimulus or technique and being intentional with your attention.
Yeah.
So you're meditating in the cold tub and you're meditating at the CrossFit gym.
Yeah.
You can meditate in movement just as well as you can in stillness. So if vigorous physical exercise and exposure to the cold are useful avenues for you to access the internal state of calm, relaxed presence, then you're meditating.
I agree.
Yeah, and so what you can start to do is really like make a deep impression of that state. Let's say when you're in the cold tub or when you're in the CrossFit gym, let's really just drop into it, like become curious about it, feel it fully, and then endeavor to recollect that state as often as it occurs to you in your waking life for greater frequency and duration. So like CrossFit and cold are the way in. And now that you're in, how do you bring that state into your life, your larger life? And that's the practice. And in time, it's like there's what one of my teachers would call a figure ground reversal, where you find this state in the cold tub or in the CrossFit gym. In time, that state becomes the baseline of operation, and all of the events of your life unfold within that unbroken state of presence. Now, man, come on, I'm not there personally, but I'm getting closer, and I know individuals who are here. That's the thing. Words get tricky when we start talking about this stuff. Words fail. But yeah, for me, I love the cold too. I'm a nut for the cold. I spent time with Wim Hof in Poland a couple of years ago, and the breath practice, is an amazing way to just kind of sweep out mental clutter and contact the felt sense of the body. I love the sauna. I mentioned to you before we started this chat, I'm on the beach every day, stretching, breathing, doing my qigong, getting in the ocean. I like to take a few walks every day, and I don't bring my phone. When I go to the gym, I don't bring my phone. Look, nowadays, if you don't have your phone with you, you're basically meditating.
Pretty much.
Like the cell phone and the hyperconnectivity, it's so detrimental to establishing any degree of present moment concentration that if you just leave that thing somewhere else for 40 minutes and then do whatever you got to do, wash the dishes, take a shower, play with your kid, just make it your aim to whatever you're doing, just do that. That can be a meditation. So people say that, well, I don't have time to sit for 45 minutes every day. You don't have to. You can take things that you already do or that you already have to do and just be intentional with your attention while you're doing those things. And in doing that, you're cultivating the skills of the meditator. Equanimity, the capacity to accept reality the way it is, absent of any preference. Concentration, the capacity to direct the totality of your attention and focus into the task at hand. And sensory clarity, a palpable moment by moment connection to the felt sense of your body. Cultivate those 3 skills, life becomes much more easy to manage and much more pleasant.
Yesterday, I did a podcast, and after talking for like 2 hours, I was like, I gotta like get out
Mm-hmm.
outside.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking of, now you can use that hike to like educate yourself more and pop in an AirPod and
Yeah, dude.
or get music, and you're gonna sprint, and you're gonna feel like that techno music really on every step with the RPM. And I was like, nah, actually, I've heard now a voice in my head. And I've had all these lights and technology around me for so long.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just gonna go by myself,
Good for you. Wise life decision
Yeah.
right there.
And it was precious.
Yeah,
Beautiful.
that's another thing. There's a hyper abundance of information available. There's always the opportunity to listen on a podcast about an interesting topic. But at what point is it the law of diminishing returns?
Yeah.
Like I see it a lot. I go down to the beach every day. I take a long walk. I take a long stretch. And I see people all the time walking right next to the ocean with sneakers on and AirPods in. And I think to myself, God bless you. You're here. I'm so glad you're here. But you're missing the point. And I always think there's no podcast, not even this podcast, not even my own conversations, that would be more beneficial than walking alongside the ocean and listening to the ocean. You will learn more about life from that than you will to any talking head. Sometimes, enrich yourself with information, but know that can go too far. And yeah, it's a good idea to take a hike and just be in nature. Listen to your own thoughts and maybe lean into this newfound capacity to not think and just listen to the sounds. There's a lot to be learned.
I know, and nothing beats the present moment.
Yeah.
Because I started running, and I'm like already regretting it, right? I'm already like, fuck, this sucks. I should have. I'm not too far. I can make it back. Let me just. And I'm like, no, and I know these thoughts when they come.
Mm-hmm.
I just keep going. I'm
Yeah.
like, whatever. You're in now. There's no turning back.
Yeah.
But the thoughts crawl in. They're like, this sucks. It's boring. Like, entertain yourself, right? And then I look and I see all these people coming towards me with their phone on the hike. And if they don't look at it, they have it still like clamped on them somehow. Like everybody has it.
Yeah.
If you look, and I get hyper aware of it because I'm missing it. So I look for it and I see it on everybody.
Yeah.
Obese, fit, everybody has it on them, right? Tall, not tall, female, male, whatever. Everybody's running. Everybody has it.
Yeah.
And then there comes a point where you catch yourself not thinking at all. You're like, oh my God. Because, and also it becomes like playful. You're like, where is my mind gonna go on this run, right? I have an hour now.
Yeah.
What is it gonna do? First I'm thinking about work, and then, okay, podcast tomorrow, and then yesterday was good, okay. And then at some point there comes this clarity where you're
Right.
like, oh wow, I was just stepping and moving and watching my feet, and there's a beauty to that. And also
Totally.
when you return back to the world, there's some sort of like, I wouldn't call it softness, but like some sort of like calm, some saintness.
You're nourished.
Yes.
Yeah. You come back with a full cup
Yes.
and you have something to give.
And I don't think you would do that even if you educated yourself, like you said, with
No.
Joe Rogan. And I don't think so. Or pumped yourself with techno music. I think that you come even more stressed home, kind of.
Yeah, I think so too. That it's almost pulling you out of the pristine beauty of the natural world that you're in. Also, I think that, that time spent with no demand on your attention, with no phone that can co-opt your attention at any moment, allows for the upwelling and metabolization of emotional residue that we collect. It's just part of being a human. We collect emotional gunk. And if we give ourselves the space and time to just release it, then we don't carry around baggage. But if we're always, we live in a culture where the primary means of emotional regulation is distraction. And if there's always a screen in front of your face, then you're not giving your body the state of relaxed presence that it needs to start to just let some knots unwind. You know what I mean? And you just continue to carry stuff. So that's a central thing in my day and in my work is no phone zones. Create, in your day, no phone zones, and stick to them and watch what happens with your mental health. Look, these things are designed by brilliant individuals to steal and co-opt your attention. If you don't have systems and structures in place to prevent that from happening, there is a momentum happening in this culture that's just going to grab your attention just like everybody else. No phone zones are a great way to preserve your peace of mind.
I love when people like you that are on social media, because you're like I always call this the Trojan horse.
Yeah.
You still, because there's also no pleasure in you just being a healthy guy on the beach and keeping it to yourself, So you infiltrate a little bit the social media and spread your wisdom, but also you do no phone zone,
Yeah, I put the kites out. I throw it out there and just say, here's a message, and maybe if somebody sees it, they'll find my work. I mean, you got to play the game. I'm in business, I'm a business owner. I do want to help people. I want people to come into my world, and that's one of the ways that you do it. But it's very easy to get sucked in to that and have a relationship with it that's not healthy. I think you see that a lot with people nowadays. So, like I said, I read a book once called 10 Arguments for Deleting Your Social Media Right Now. It's a pretty good book by, I think the guy's named Jaron Lanier. Made me think, but one thing that he said in the book that I knew, but I never heard it so profoundly articulated. And it actually made me stop and put the book down, and like my jaw dropped. I was like, oh shit. And what he said was, you are not the consumer of social media. You are the product of social media. Your attention is the commodity that advertisers buy. That's why your social media is called a feed. You think of it like you're a fucking factory farmed cattle just sitting at the trough, feeding. And every so often, you get an advertisement. Somebody paid the platform for the commodity of your attention. Human attention is being farmed, and you're being fed. And that just fucking made me think, holy shit, that's kind of dark. And now you see it. Like, if you're at any public spot, an airport or wherever, just look around at the feeding. And it's kind of alarming.
It's kind of disgusting.
Yeah, now, does it mean that social media is evil? No, because we said before, things are not so black and white. There's redeeming qualities and there's things that can be out of balance. It's your responsibility to create structures and containers around how you engage with those kind of things, because you must know that they can be very detrimental. So, like I said, if you don't have no phone zones, you're just going to get sucked in. And, I can relate. Like, I think if you go, let's say you were going to go a day without your phone or 2 days, that first 3 hours or something is going to be like you've been cut off from the herd. It's almost like FOMO is kicking in. Like, wait, you realize all the things that you need your phone for. Hour 4, 5, 6, the rest of the day. Oh, it's so liberating. It's so liberating. So I would encourage everyone listening to give yourself that reward, a couple of times a week. Just leave the phone alone. People think they're so important. I have kids. Bro, I was born in 1984. Nobody had a goddamn cell phone. And somehow we lived, you know? Reward yourself with a couple of, at least a half hour somewhere a day where you just aren't reachable.
My mother-in-law was freaking out because at night now I hit the switchers, all of them, besides the fridge.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, and she couldn't charge her phone at overnight. It made me smile because also I can barely explain it to her why I do it,
Yeah.
but I did it and I sleep so good.
Yeah.
I sleep deep.
Good for you.
Yeah, it's a nice thing for people to try. It's
Yeah.
almost like it's not exactly like sleeping. I guess if this was there was not so many people around, it would be like if you have a house and there's no Wi-Fi or anything reaching you, and you do that, it's really like sleeping in the woods kind of
Yeah.
experience. And when you hit all the switchers, man, I mean, there's like REM, and then there's like
Yeah, your
no
nervous
electricity.
system is given the permission to really downregulate. It's no
Yeah.
longer being penetrated by frequencies.
Yeah.
Yeah, good for you.
And you feel like you're not so inflamed in the morning. Sometimes I wake up, I have to go in the cold right away.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as I open my eyes.
Mm.
And when I have all the switchers out, I feel okay in the morning. I feel better. Feel pretty good. I can wait, make some coffee, then hit the cold.
Good.
Yeah. Man, so I have one more question. Because I like perfected presence when I'm by myself. What really triggers it is unpresent people sometimes, or a
Mhm.
lot of times, I guess. Call it, it could be family, it could be a friend, it could be your wife. It's I think in Tolly they say like if you can be so fully present that you can really untrigger or pull someone in your presence.
Yeah.
And I guess a lot of times I'm not powerful enough to pull somebody in my presence. Sometimes I am, sometimes I'm not. I feel a lot of times like after the gym, I have this like ultimate presence where nothing can bother me, or when I come out of the ice, like when I had those like extreme present moments, I can be like I can really pull somebody in where like they even recognize that whatever problem they're telling me about is pointless and nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
But not always. Do you in your personal life experience being triggered by unpresent people where like when you're alone you can really perfect it, and you know you're at the beach and like you know what you're doing and where you're at, and you can really feel into your body and you have silence, but then when your mom calls, or do you feel those like outside can get you really out of your presence?
I feel like we would need to come to some clarity around what it is exactly that you mean when you say presence. Because if you're speaking to like a state of non-conceptual stillness or like deep, deep relaxation and like the cessation of any mental perturbation, that's a state. You can be present to that state, but that's not necessarily what presence is. Presence is just an awareness of whatever is unfolding in the present moment, which could be your own annoyance at somebody else who's pulling you out of presence. I think it goes back to what you and I talked about earlier around it's this preference that things were other than the way things are that you're suffering, not necessarily the state that other people are in. And the less preference that you have and the less perturbable you become around the state of other people, the more you can just relax. I think the more you'll find that you can call other people into that space of connection, but only because you don't need them to do anything at all. I'm over here, I'm being present, but you're not being present. What the fuck is your problem? Be present with me.
Yeah.
Who's not present?
You.
Yeah. So just relax and let whatever's happening
because
happen.
you don't fully accept
Yeah. It's
the moment.
yeah, it's almost like your own effort and your own desire for somebody to be in a different state than what they're in is the only thing that's stopping the very thing that you want. It's preference that is the root of the suffering. If you can soften your edges around the way people have to be, I think you'll find the more relaxed people find themselves when you're around.
And it's the giving in completely to what is.
Yeah, so here's the thing that we should definitely speak to is because for a guy like you, you're diligent, strong determination. You will get into the cold tub. No, I dig it because I do it too. I get it. I'm the same way. Or you will fucking get through this wad. You will accomplish the mission. You will persevere and strive forward and get it done. But what we're talking about now, radical, deep presence, present moment saturation, is actually a surrender of all ambition. It's a non-doing. It's a complete giving up. It is literally unconditional surrender. And it's becoming more clear to me that surrender, paradoxically, is really the highest calling of the warrior. To just totally give up. Now, it's not, I give up. I give up. It's give up I. Give up this internal commentary that I've come to believe is who I am, that has a problem with the fact that this person's scrolling on their phone. What would it be like if I just gave that up? If I just peeled back that layer and relaxed more fully into right now, without needing anything to change at all. Then I think, as you can do that more authentically and deeply, as you can surrender, really give up, I think you'll find that people meet you at the presence that feels nourishing to you, but only because you don't need them to.
I guess it's just so hard.
Maybe
to
it's
surrender.
Yeah.
Because
it's terrifying.
There's something about the whole gym thing where you shame yourself.
Yeah.
Right? For not being good enough.
Yeah.
There's a lot of shame. Like you're not good enough. You actually have to work out harder.
Mm-hmm.
You have to lift more.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to get in the cold.
Mm-hmm. And then one day, if you keep doing this, one day you'll be able to relax.
No.
Right.
I don't think ever. You'll never be good enough. You'll never be enough weight.
Right.
You'll never be good enough. And that's why, yeah, it's so hard to, you have this ego driving you, like, what if if I surrender and give up, what will happen to me?
Yeah.
Right? There's no trust in that will open a whole nother capability. Instead, you're afraid of getting fat or lazy or sloppy or whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess I have to practice to trust myself, to surrender.
To surrender, yeah. And maybe it's not trust yourself. Maybe you could inquire as to, what do you believe is really happening here? What do you believe? Is there a greater force orchestrating your experience? And maybe that's what you're surrendering into. I'm not going to put a word on whatever that is, because that's for each man to decide. But if you believe that you have to do it all yourself, and if you believe that you are separate from everything else, then yes, surrender is really terrifying. But if you start to open to the possibility that larger forces are at play, then surrendering becomes the path to freedom. It's like, I think this is a Rumi poem. I'll paraphrase, but for a drop to recognize itself as the ocean, it would have to surrender its identity as a drop.
It's just you open your phone and everybody constantly tells you that you're not good enough.
Yeah.
Especially as a man.
Yeah.
You need to make a certain amount of money. Otherwise nobody's gonna want you. And you need to look a certain way, appear a certain way, be tall a certain way, right? Speak a certain way. You're definitely not perfect the way you are.
Sure.
And then you see people obese or very unhealthy who really also neglected that and like tell the world that they love themselves, but they clearly harm themselves. So they also like, you don't want to be like that either, kind of like accept anything, kind of, right? Because they take it to the other way, kind of. So there's, as a man, there's a hard navigation where I guess the only thing that really pulls it back to is my child, who just loves me the way I am, kind of.
Yeah.
In a very natural way. He doesn't care how much money I make or
Totally.
or if I perform in the gym.
So
right?
you're taking us to this point that we got to earlier, which is that this capacity to surrender and lovingly and radically and unconditionally accept yourself in the world. You're saying how hard it is to do and how terrifying it is to do, which just proves the earlier point that it's savage. It's the epitome of savagery to just give up your own ambition, to give up your own preference, to give up your own need for you to be different than what you are and for life to be different than what it is, and just accept it. Yeah, but, right? No, it's fucking scary. No buts. This is it.
I know that.
It's that surrender, but you can't start there. You got to start where you're at and build this discipline, this relentless drive. And you need to keep pushing yourself and hammering yourself like a square peg into a round block. And you keep doing that, but then it starts to occur to you, where's the finish line here? This is never going to stop. And then the present moment starts to whisper to you, it can only ever stop right now. And you only have to just give up right now. Just give up. Like we said before, the fear is, well, if I give up, I won't get anything done. The reality is that surrender, that deep letting go infuses you with a vital energy that you could never find yourself. And it just starts to swim through you. And now you become really alive because you let yourself die.
And would you say you do that?
I think that, I'm not trying to claim to be some kind of spiritual guru or enlightened being, but I did mention that I've had the good fortune to encounter some real bona fide teachers, and I've just done what they've been telling me to do for a number of years now, and the practice is bearing fruit. And that's why I have an added motivation to share this work with as many people as I can, because it works.
That's crazy.
It's been great rapping with you, man.
Man, stillness can be so powerful. I think Tolle also says it's the spaces in between the words are much more interesting than the words,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
When you don't say something.
Yeah. And if we to talk about surrender, I don't want to get on another tangent here, but to stay in that metaphor of the space between the words. So there's you, there's Candy, there's Michael, there's this self-experience. But then there is the substrate of awareness in which that self-experience arises from and returns to. And the practice of surrender is beginning to pay more attention to that empty space of awareness that you spring out of and fall back into. That starts to become more interesting than the words.
I know, because you can feel the now in between the words.
Mm-hmm.
Because as soon as you hear the words, you kind of lose it almost. And then when you stop speaking, it like opens this like sensation over your body kind of.
Mm-hmm. And I think the real masters, I think Eckhart Tolle would be one of them, can maintain that state of deep presence that we're speaking about, even while they're engaged in conversation, even while they're making the scrambled eggs. It becomes unbroken. At first, we find it in the cold. We find it in the gym. We find it in the sauna. We find it with the cops running at you. We find it on the meditation cushion. But then we invite that in. And once it starts to come in, now it starts to say, okay, now I want to come here. I want to come here. I want to come here. It's like it starts to permeate the entirety of your experience. And that happens when you stop trying so hard to make it happen. When you stop preferring one state over a different state, or this is present, this is dropped in, this is meditation, but this isn't. You just make peace with whatever's happening. You surrender. But like I said, only after you've cultivated that discipline. That discipline that you have is like the sacrifice that you have to now put on the altar and say, okay, here, take this. I built this. There's nothing that I can imagine that would be more terrifying than giving this up. So, here. You know? After you really cultivate that discipline, that drive, you have to be honest and say, wow, it would be way more uncomfortable to give this up than it would be to keep building it. And the fact of the matter is, whatever the scarier thing is, whatever the scary thing is, the cave you fear to enter holds the treasure that you seek. On the other side of the authentic fear, the thing that, whoa, no, I don't want to do that. That's the next evolved version of you. So you lean into that. You do the scary thing. And at a certain point, the hard thing for guys like you is not necessarily the scary thing.
Of course, once you put yourself in pain on a regular basis, the hardest thing is to not do anything.
Exactly.
Right? Once you run as fast as you can and you lift the most weight you can possibly can and you survive the most coldest temperatures you can, because the hike was not necessarily hard to do. It's really easy when you distract yourself. It's really hard when you don't distract yourself, right?
Yeah, exactly.
When you're still.
Yeah. So if that's the question for some guys. What would be harder? Another brutal workout where you fucking have to crawl out of the gym and you can't barely walk the next day? Or to sit on the couch with no screen, no phone, no nothing for 30 minutes?
Yeah. Oh, of course. Or I've also done cold plunge with watching a David Goggins video, or cold plunge, just the cold plunge.
Yeah.
it's like black and white. It's like one is completely different thing suddenly. Like, you know,
Yeah.
free, like being present. It is the hardest thing because the ego and the everything else trying to protect you from that as much as possible. So giving up and surrendering to the now is really the probably the most difficult thing that you can do.
Humanity has survived because we evolved the capacity to project our minds into the future and to reflect on what happened in the past. That gave us the capacity to plan, to hunt, to predict future outcomes, to create stories. It's amazing. But like all things, the gift can become the curse. And because we're so good at projecting and reflecting, we totally lose the capacity to abide. And that's to our own detriment. So it's really, it's not supernatural. It's just the practice of being here. That's all it is. But you'll find that being here is actually pretty profound, and it's a pretty nice place to be. And then, in the work that I offer, so that, what we've talked about is the central theme. Okay. But then there's lifestyle interventions and modifications that a man can and should implement that will help him cultivate that capacity to become present. It's really hard to relax into that state of open, empty, spacious freedom if you're not sleeping well, if you're eating motherfucking fake-ass processed chemical junk food, if your body never sees the light of the sun, if you don't move regularly, So there are lifestyle interventions that we make so that we can more frequently find this space of peace within ourselves. And candy, like I said, once you start to find it in yourself, now you bring it to the people in your life who you love, who depend on you. Your presence becomes medicine. You just walk into the room and you just make everybody feel calm and relaxed and safe. That's the gift that a man has to give. And like I said, the more men can find that in themselves, the better off we'll all be.
I'm gonna. Sorry. How can people find you?
My website is savageandsaint.com. That has links to my social media. Which I just have Instagram. It's at Savage and Saint. And then probably the best thing to do is through the website, sign up for my newsletter. I send something out once per week, and if you subscribe to the newsletter, you'll get a couple of weekly reflections, and you'll know, all right, I'm kind of down for this individual. And if what I'm talking about isn't your speed, then just unsubscribe. But that's the best way to do it, and that's the channel through which I promote my work. I have an online men's course called Masculine Vitality. It's a 12-week course that tackles all the themes that we just talked about. And I also teach and host residential retreats, Savage and Saint retreats, once or twice per year. But if you subscribe to the newsletter, you'll be in the know for all the offerings.
Amazing. Pleasure to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you, man. Great talk, and also great to not talk.
Right?
Yeah.